Hey everybody, Bill 1911 here. Today we're going to do part 2 of our two-part series on the Smith & Wesson Model 60-9, okay? This is a 5-shot revolver. The first thing we're going to do, like always, is we're going to check, make sure there's nothing in the gun, okay? So from there, we're going to start dismantling this gun. Well, the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to take the grips off. Okay, now that's first because there's actually a screw that's right here underneath this grip, all right, which we're going to go over a little bit in more detail of why that screw is the way it is. All three of the screws that hold the side plate on this gun are slightly different, and we need to pay attention to that when we take this apart, okay? Alright, so we're going to pop our grips off, alright? We're going to set them aside because we won't need them for right now. So we have 3 screws. This one kind of has a rounded head to it. It's kind of decorative. It's out there where everybody can see it. This one is completely flat so that the grip can be over the top of it and it doesn't interfere with it. Now, so since we know this one is very different, it has that very flat head on it, we know we're not going to confuse that one with this one, okay? Because that head is a little bit rounded. I'm going to hold them up to the camera in a second and show you how they look different. At least I'm going to try. Hope the camera can get it up that close. Whoop, dropped it. Alright, so if you can notice, okay, one of those screws has an extremely flat top to its head, and the other one is slightly rounded, okay? So those are our 2 screws that we just took out. Now the third screw is very different from the other 2. In fact, it's so different that Smith & Wesson actually made it a little bit bigger in diameter on the head so you can't confuse it. If you notice, this screw will not fit down into that hole. It's too big, and it won't fit in that hole. On the tip of it, there's a little piece of hardened steel. Now that piece of hardened steel is there for a reason, okay? And the reason is that we can now remove the entire cylinder and arm from the revolver. When that screw comes out, this will come apart. If that screw is in, it won't come out, all right? And once it comes out, the whole thing will come completely apart, okay? So we're going to clean that up in a moment because it's dirty. And now we're going to take the side plate off the gun. I think probably the best way to do this is just slip your screwdriver under here and just give it a slight lift, okay? Don't go crazy because you don't want to dent the frame or the side plate. Just ease it up. Okay, it'll come right out. Now you're going to want to get it from this bottom side. Don't try to get it up here on the hammer because there's a little hook right here on the top edge of this that slips underneath here and allows that panel to go back into place. Okay, the side plate. Now, something that commonly happens when you take these things apart is that this blocking bar here comes out of place and it's hard to tell where it came from. Right here, there's a little bit of a kind of a knob sticking up, a little pin sticking up. That's where the back end of this goes over, okay? And the front end drops right back in behind the hammer there, okay? So that's where that piece is actually going to go when we're finished here. So we're going to take it out. We're going to set it aside, okay? So the next thing we need to do is we got to get one of our special tools, a large paper clip. Okay, now this works very good for what I'm about to show you. We're also going to need a pocket knife, some kind of blade that we can use to get into little corners and manipulate springs and stuff. It comes in very, very handy, believe me on this. Okay, so we're going to cock the hammer back. But there's one thing we're going to have to do before it will allow us to cock that hammer back, and that's to pull this backward. Or we can put the cylinder back in it if we choose, okay, you put it in here, all fumble fingered, okay, we can put it in and we can close it, and that will pull that back out of the way. All right, now what happens is right here, this is part of that release mechanism. So when we push it forward, okay, it allows us to pull the cylinder out, okay, but it stays forward, and in that forward position we can't cock the gun. It locks it up solid, okay. So we can either push it in and let that come back a little bit and then we can cock the gun, okay, or we can simply hold it back with our finger. Now, to make things easier on me, I'm going to let it stay in. I'm going to leave the cylinder in for a second and take it out a bit later. So when we pull the hammer back on this thing, there's a little hole that's right here on the hammer strut, okay? And it's just the right size to put that large paper clip through. Now, don't go way through it, okay? If you go all the way through like that, then you have a hard time getting the thing out. You want to go in so there's just a little bit of it sticking out on this side of the hammer strut, okay? Maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. Okay, once we got that in place with about 1/8 of an inch sticking out, okay, now we're going to hold the hammer, okay? We're going to pull it back with our thumb, pull the trigger, and then let it go forward. And what's going to happen is that paper clip is going to retain the string on our strut, on our hammer strut, and allow us to pull it out, okay? So when we put it back, it's going to be the inverse operation. We're going to put it like that, we're going to cock the thing, and then we're going to pull our paper clip out. Now, right now I'm going to take this paper clip out of here because I'm going to want to clean this spring thoroughly and put it back. So I'm going to take a hold of it, put the ball-shaped end down on my mat. I'm going to grab this little black buffer and I'm going to push it down and then pull this paper clip back out. Then when I release it, the spring can come out. It takes a little bit of finger strength, but I know you can do it. So push down, slide it out, and then release, and that allows your spring to come off the end of your strut rod. Now, when you put it back together, if you'll notice, right here in the revolver, okay, there is kind of a cup, okay, right there, okay, that the ball-shaped end of this buffer fits into, okay? It fits right in there. If you put this in backwards, it doesn't go back together the way it's supposed to. The other side of it has kind of a cup in it, and you can see that that looks like it's made to catch that spring, and that is exactly what it is made for, okay? So these revolvers are very, very well thought out. All of these parts fit together in a certain way so that they work together. All right, so we're going to set those aside. Now that I've got it to this point, probably the next thing I'm going to pull out is the hammer. All right, so we're going to cock it back just a little bit, okay, hold the trigger, all right, and just kind of wiggle it and pick up on it, and it's going to slide right out, okay. Now I'm going to show you something about this gun. I actually catch a lot of flack for how much oil I put in these guns. But in South Florida, we have a humidity problem that you just flat would not believe. Now, if you look, we actually have rust forming around here, right around that hammer pin. And it's going to be on the back of the hammer too, okay? If this gets too bad, I've seen it lock the hammer in place so that it just will not cock, okay? So some of the pins in this thing and some of the parts are not made of stainless steel. They're made of high carbon steel, and high carbon steel rusts like crazy. Yet we're going to take this trigger return spring unit out, okay? Because if not, it just keeps pushing the hammer back and we have a hard time getting the trigger out. So in order to get this out, I'm going to pull the trigger, okay, and I'm going to get back here underneath the back end of this and pick up just a little bit, okay? I'm not going to go crazy, okay? Pick it up a little bit. Now, when you go to take this thing out, you got to be careful because that spring is going to want to shoot loose and come across the room. Careful. All right, there we go. Now the spring just came out, okay? Once that spring is out, the tension's off it, it'll come right out. That spring is a beast, okay? A lot of pressure to it. Now, there's a little part right down here on this trigger that I want to show you that's really important, okay? Once you pull the trigger out, you got to make sure that this little bar that's in here is up here, because when you put it back together, it is possible for that bar to have dropped down in here between the trigger and the frame, all right? But you want that bar up here inside this compartment, okay? So, in order to take the trigger out, we're going to use, this is where our pocket knife is going to come in very handy, all right? Now, there is a spring in here that controls this piece right here. If you pull that piece too far back, that spring will pop off, and then you have a dickens of a time getting that spring back in there. You can do it, but it's a real pain, all right? So I'm just going to slip that knife right up into here, okay? And then I'm going to start easing that trigger right out of that hole, okay? And it'll come up a little bit at a time like that, okay? And then slide the whole unit right out. Now, as you can see, this is spring loaded, and that's that spring in there that I was talking about. Hopefully you'll be able to see it. All right, that spring is right down here. Okay, that's the spring. It hooks here, and it hooks on a little arm that's right down in here. Okay. The next thing we need to pull out is this locking dog right here. Okay, now that dog is what locks the cylinder so the cylinder doesn't move. But we're done with needing to keep the release pinned back. So I'm going to go ahead and open the cylinder and take it out now completely. All right. In order to get this piece out, okay, the first thing we have to do is we need to push this down so that it goes all the way to the bottom. All right, now probably the best way to do that, once again, is to get in there with our pocket knife, okay, and push that blade into position. Now from there, we need to simply lift up on that piece, okay, and it's going to ride right up. Don't lift it out all the way at first, because it also has a spring in there that's going to try to shoot across the room. So we want to, now that it's up part way, we want to ease that spring out slowly in a controlled way so that we don't lose control of it, all right? And send it flying across the room. That is definitely not what we want. Then we lift the piece the rest of the way out, okay? And this revolver is basically disassembled. Now, if you want to, we can take this release out. It's just one screw, okay? So we can put our screwdriver in there and pop that screw loose, okay? Now the release comes off the side. All right, now we're going to simply push this up in the back, okay? And there's a spring in it, all right? Whoop, which I just shot across the room. Now I got to go find it. All right, so this will slide out, okay? Now I'm going to shut off the camera now and go find the part that I just shot across the room. Alright, so I was able to find the two little parts that came out. One of them is a little itty bitty spring, okay, which I'm having trouble picking up in these rubber gloves, okay, and that's right here, okay, and the other one is called a detent, okay, or in this case it's a plunger, okay. This is the spring and the detent that fits right into that hole that's right here in the release mechanism. Okay, so, well, we've got this gun taken apart about as far as we're going to, okay? So we're going to now get in here and we're going to clean up this frame because it's just full of rust, frankly, okay? Down here in South Florida, you'll take a gun and you'll have it in your nice cool house, all right? Everything's nice and cool inside. and you take it out and you walk out the front door of your house. Well, in the summertime it's 95 degrees, so it's about 20 degrees difference from what your house is set at with the air conditioner and the outside temperature. And our humidity hovers around 90 to 95% all the time. So what happens is that condensation forms on the gun, but it doesn't just happen on the outside of the gun, it also happens on the inside of the gun. And that's where we see all this rust coming from in here in all these places, okay? So this is just something that we deal with here in South Florida. Alright, so let's get some bore cleaner, and we're going to get a patch, and we're going to go to work and start cleaning things up. Alright, now, come here, patch. Give me a hard time. Come on. Okay. So we're going to wet our patch with bore cleaner, and I think what I'm going to start with is cleaning up springs that I can get the trash out of. Okay. So just going to kind of roll this thing in here. These real small ones are very difficult to get in between the windings, so you can't really effectively clean them the way I normally do. I'll show you how I normally clean them in just a second. Okay. So we're going to get as much of that stuff out of there as we possibly can. Alright. You got to be careful with these tiny, tiny springs because it's easy to bend and kink them. Okay. So you want to kind of be gentle with them. Get all the crap out of them you can. Okay. Using a cleaning brush works pretty well to get the dried garbage out from between the windings with these little tiny springs. Alright. So we got that cleaned up. Now, the outside of this rod is pretty bad. Okay, we're going to clean that up in a minute. The little detent here actually looks pretty good. Okay, well, now I'm going to show you how we normally clean the spring. Okay, you just take your wet patch and you fold it diagonally. Okay, and you slip it between the windings of the spring. Okay. It may be hard to get it in there on some of these springs, and some of them it goes pretty easy. This one, of course, is going to fight me, just because it can. Okay, but once you get it in there, you can do a job on it. Alright, this one isn't going to go that way, so I'll show you that you can do it just by slipping the edge of it in. Okay, it'll do the same thing. Now you're going to pull these two corners together so that you're wrapped around the wire. By doing that, you clean all of the surfaces of the spring simultaneously, both inside and out. Okay, and you just kind of crank it like it's a big screw. Alright, and once you crank this through there, you're going to be all cleaned up. Alright, so that's it. Alright, so we've cleaned that spring. Alright, we're also going to clean the spring that's on our trigger return here, and if you notice, it's just about the same width, so I think I'm going to use the same technique and just use the edge of the patch to stick through there, and then pull it up around. Alright, and then I'm going to crank it all the way in one direction, okay, to clean it. And then I'm going to crank it all the way in the other direction. And I'll show you something. This one even changed color. There was so much garbage and rust on it. Now, part of it still looks pretty bad. So I'm going to keep going and crank it back through again the other way. Alright. Alright, I think we just about got this little devil cleaned up. Alright, so those springs are clean. Now there's another little spring that's right here on the cylinder lock dog, okay? And it has got a good bit of rust on the bottom of it. So it was definitely in jeopardy here. So that's our lovely weather down here. We're surrounded on three sides by the ocean, and so the air here, it tends to be a bit on the corrosive side because we have so much water in the air, and that water is actually evaporated seawater. So there are some issues that we face down here. Pretty much any place that's coastal is going to have those same types of issues. Okay, so now this piece here also needs to come out. There's a spring in it too, so you're going to want to be careful that it don't go flying. Okay, it simply slides right out the side. Okay, and as you can see, it's got a little spring in it and another spring with some rust on it. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to clean it up, do the best we can with it. It's tiny, so we're going to need to be careful with it. Alright, now we're going to start cleaning up all these parts. Now they've all got all kinds of garbage on them. Most of it appears to be rust, which is not a good thing. Okay, so yeah, there's actually some pitting on this thing, some rust in it and some pitting, and that's not the best thing in the world, to tell you that. So it's not really surprising. This is one of my carry pieces, and you'd be amazed at how much junk gets down into these little crevices and nooks and crannies in these guns when you're carrying them. I don't know, it's just the nature of the beast, I guess. Okay, so what I like to do is make sure that I don't lose track of things, so we're going to just stick that spring back in there temporarily, just to kind of sit there. Now there is some pit rust right around here, okay, just a little bit. So there is a myth that stainless steel does not rust, and that is just simply not true. It will rust. It's very difficult to get it to rust, but it will. And you know, a lot of that also depends on the exact alloy of the stainless steel. Some of it's very hard to get it to rust. There's a metal called Monel, which is sometimes confused for stainless steel. Now, Monel is what they make the propeller shafts for ships out of. Now, that stuff will not rust. You can put that underwater for 1,000 years and it doesn't seem to rust. It's an interesting metal. It's called Monel. Come back here, you. Now, we want to get into all the little crevices that we can. Okay, make sure that everything is clean before we put this back together, because otherwise, why did we do all this work? Alright, so we're getting there. Oh, look at that. Got some garbage up in there. Now, this is right around this firing pin right in here. This is one of the worst areas for collecting lint and hair and things like that that comes off your body when you carry one of these things in a holster. I had to deal with that with my Model 10, even though it was down on my side and kind of out in the air when I was in law enforcement. It still collected a lot of stuff. I mean, you'd be surprised. Right? Now, we've got some rust. Very difficult to show it to you, but right down inside here in the frame, we've got some rust where that release dog goes through the frame. So we're going to try to get in there and see if we can get some of that cleaned up a little bit. Okay. And it looks like it's just surface rust, so it's not a problem. Okay. There is a difference between surface rust and pit rust. Okay, pit rust actually bores into the metal, and you start progressively losing more and more steel. Okay, surface rust is just what it sounds like. It's just on the surface, and pretty much you can pretty well clean it off. I mean, a lot of time you don't see anything. There's a little bit of pitting in here around this hammer pin right at the bottom of it. Okay, I'm not sure how bad it is, but I'm going to get in here with this screwdriver and probe it a little bit and see. Okay, and alright, it's not too deep. That's good. But we're going to work at it a little bit and get as much of it out as we can, because rust is, well, it's made of steel, so it's hard. And it is abrasive. It's very abrasive and can cause premature wear. So you want to get that out of there if you possibly can. Alright. And we got some more of the same problem right up in here, which is, it appears also to be just on the surface. It's not real bad. So I'm just going to get in there and make sure it's all cleared out. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, I probably got out of frame a little bit. Sorry about that. I'm trying to keep it where you can see it, but it's hard to keep my eyes on what I'm doing and on where the cameras are pointed. So, hopefully, between the two cameras, I didn't lose too much of what I'm doing. Alright, let me get that rust out of there a little bit. Alright, so alright, now after this is all cleaned up, we're going to want to take a dry patch in here and see how much other of this stuff we can get out. We're also going to use this cleaning brush because it'll get into places that we can't get that little brush into, or I mean that little patch into. So we're going to get it as clean as we can, much garbage out as possible, okay? And that way it's going to function a lot better when we put her back together. It should be a lot smoother. Alright, so it looks fairly good, so let's finish the dry up here. Now, most of the time, if you're in the rest of the country that's not down here in South Florida, okay, you're going to want to be much more sparing on the way you oil these springs. And I'm going to show you how to do that so that you don't over oil them. Probably the best way is the same way that we cleaned the spring, only we're going to use oil on the patch, okay? So I'm going to put some oil on the patch. Alright, and once I get that little guy oiled up like that, once again I'm going to slip it between the windings, okay, just like I did before, and then pull the ends together. And of course I'm being fumble fingered. Sorry about that. Okay, we get it pulled together like that. And now as we crank this back and forth through here, it's going to put a light coating of oil over the entire spring. Okay, every side of that spring is now going to have a little bit of oil on it. Alright. Alright, that's our hammer strut spring. Okay. Oh, got it caught. There we go. Now we're going to do our trigger return spring in the same way. Get it between those windings, pull it up tight, and crank it through. Okay, it's arguing with me, of course. Why? Because it can. Hey, sorry about that. Alright, so we get this all cranked through, and we've got a nice light coat of oil on all these springs. Now that's all you need for the most part, okay? There shouldn't be a problem. That should be plenty slippery for you. Now, we're going to start pre-reassembling, okay, just sticking springs back basically where they go. Alright, okay. Now, one other thing. Now that you've got this spring oiled, it's going to be a lot slipperier when you put it back together with that paper clip. So it's probably going to be a bit annoying for you. Alright, so there's only one way that you can put this release in. It'll only go in one direction because this screw has to drop in through the hole right there so that you can put the piece back together, alright? But remember that spring that we shot across the room, okay? We are going to have to put that back in. So, that's this little dude right here, okay? And I'm just going to put a touch of oil on it. Okay, and I'll put a touch of oil in the track, okay? This plunger has to go back inside that little spring and up into here. Okay, now I'm going to run it back and forth a couple times, get the oil all lubricated into it. Now we're going to put it back into place. Now this is another place where that pocket knife is going to come in very, very handy, okay? You can do it with a screwdriver, but I like the wider area of the pocket knife because it tends to keep it from going flying, okay, like that. All right, now we're see that? See how easy it is for that thing to take off and go flying? Come on, be nice, you. See, it's very slippery from the oil. So once we've got it in, okay, almost there, all right. There it is. Okay, now that's back in place, okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and put that handle back on the outside right now, okay, because I don't want to have to be fighting with it, keeping that spring in place. So we're going to go ahead and get that assembled like that, okay, give it a little twist. There we go, that's nice and tight, okay, and we can see that we're moving back and forth. And I can tell you right now, this is moving a lot smoother than it was a minute ago before we cleaned it, because it was very rough and grating from the rust that was forming underneath there. Okay, so yeah, it does move a lot better now, all right? So, all right, from here, the next thing we need to put in is that locking dog, okay? Now we're putting this back together the same way we took it apart, all right? So we're going to put that spring in there, and once again, I'm going to put it just a touch of oil in, just the lightest touch, okay? You don't want a lot in here, okay? So don't go crazy with it. That's plenty right there. And I am going to put some on the pin itself, okay? I think I got too much in there. So I'm going to dry some of it out. Okay, so now we're going to put this back into place. Okay, we're going to use the same technique that we did with the other spring. I'm going to use my knife to push it back into position while I'm pressing this down, and it'll pop right back into place for us. All right, now you know you're all the way back in when you can see it sticking up right here inside the frame. Okay, right there. All right, once that's sticking up, you know you're all the way in. All right, so the next thing we're going to put in is, of course, the trigger, right? Okay? So, the one thing I forgot to clean up real good was the hammer itself, so I'll do that last. But this pin that sticks down here on the bottom is sticking out, that one I told you about. If you put it together so that that pin is sticking down here like this, okay, your gun is not going to function, okay. You need to make sure that that pin, okay, is up into position so it's inside the cavity of this gun, all right. So you got to be careful to make sure that it goes the way you want it to, all right. So don't let it get past you on that. Okay, come on, be nice. All right, now, oh, be good, please. It's definitely fighting me. All right, there we go. Now we're getting into position. All right, now, there is a little cutout right here on the lock dog that this arm right here has to fit into, okay? And once you get that setting down in there, you're going to need to take your pocket knife and move this advancing dog back a little bit, okay? And then keep working that trigger down until it goes all the way in, all right? So, right there we go, almost there. All right, that's it. Okay, it's all the way in. So I'm going to function test it a little bit, okay? I'm going to pull that back some, and then we're going to pull that trigger through and make sure it moves. And it is not moving right. Now it's moving. Okay, there we go. All right, that's how it's supposed to go. Now, we're going to put a little bit of oil right here where these parts come together. And again, we're going to go light, very light. Okay, so don't let it get ahead of you here. All right, that's enough. All right, so we're going to test it again, and much smoother. There we go. That's what we wanted. All right, we need a little bit on the pin. Okay, and we're going to work that so it goes down through that pin all the way to the bottom, and it isn't moving, of course. Okay, got too much on it. There we go. Okay. All right, so the next thing we got to do is put in the trigger return spring, okay? Now, it only has one way that it will go in. If you notice, this little pin is sticking up a little bit on this side. That's the top, okay? So that's the side that's going to stick up out of this hole. Now, you're going to just kind of fit it into place. And now comes the hard part. Pushing that spring back into place, all right? And once you get it over there, okay, the whole thing is going to drop down into place just like that. You're going to push it in and you're there. Okay, so that's got that. Our trigger return spring is now back in place. Once again, pull your release back with your finger and function test to make sure everything is moving the way it's supposed to. And that looks pretty good. Everything's doing what we want. Okay. So, since we didn't clean up the hammer before, we're going to do it now. Okay. And again, it's got some rust forming on it, so I want to get in there with that screwdriver and make sure that I clean that up real good. Alright. Now, most of it's just going to scrape right off because it's surface rust, but it looks like a little tiny bit of pitting. Not real bad, but it's definitely there. Okay. Get it out here where you can see it better. I don't know why I'm doing it back there on the corner. Sorry about that. Alright, so we're going to go on that side, and then we're going to roll it over and look on the other side, and it looks pretty good on this side. No real rust there. Alright, so we're just going to clean it. Make sure everything is how we want it. Okay. You remember that part we took out of there that had a little spring on it? That's going to have to go right back in here. Okay, so we're going to dry all this out. Make sure we don't have any more of that solvent in there than we need. Okay, that's going to get this all cleaned up. Okay, now, there we go. That looks better. Okay, so now this piece, do we remember how it went in? Okay, it went in to this slot right here, okay? And my big fingers are fumbling the ball here again. All right, it fits in there. Okay, and then we have to depress that spring again to drop it back into place. Okay, so we're going to use our knife. We're going to stick it in there. Okay, and then we're just going to kind of align it a little bit so it fits the way it's supposed to. And function test, make sure you wiggle it a little bit, make sure it's working. And once again, just the tiniest bit of oil in there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I think I might have got a little much, but again, I'd rather have too much than too little here in South Florida with the humidity as bad as it is. Okay, so everything is moving. All right. Now I do have a little bit of excess oil on there, so I'm going to get a patch and dry it up. All right. Now, one place I do definitely want to have oil, and that is on this hammer pin, where the hammer goes through, all right? Okay. Now, I'm not going to be too shy with the oil on that particular spot. Now, in order to get this hammer back into place, what we're going to have to do is pull that release again back a little bit, and we're going to have to manipulate the trigger a little bit until it drops in. And once it drops in, it's there, okay? So pull it back and function test, all right? And it seems to be functioning properly. Now remember, that hammer's not going to drop forward right now because we haven't put the hammer return spring in yet, okay? All right, so that's the next thing to do, is put that hammer return spring back together and put it in. Now remember, we've already oiled this, so we don't have to do that again because we did remember how we wrapped our patch around it and did all that. So remember what we said about how that cap goes on here, all right? And then comes the slippery part. Okay, we got to get a hold of it. We got to push it down. Expose that hole. Slipped out of my fingers. Oh, come on, be nice now. Be nice. Where are you going? There we go. Get in position. All right. Get the cap back where it's supposed to be. Come on, you. And it is fighting me to beat the band. All right. So now, since it's trying to slide on this plastic mat, I'm going to put the rag down, and that should help to hold it a little bit. All right. Now, got to get you here. Get a good hold on you. Push you down, and I can't seem to get a hold on it right now for some reason. Nope. It's a pain. There's no doubt about it. There we go. Now we got it. Okay, now I pushed it through a little bit too far, but that's not a big problem. We can push it back to the place where we want it easy enough. Just kind of push it around a little bit. Just be careful not to push it all the way out, because it'll do that. I went too far. Not too much. Come on, you. All right, now we got it adjusted. So we're going to put it back in just like we did before. Okay, we're going to stick this right up into the hammer, just like that. Now, this is, again, a high contact area, so we are going to put some oil on here. Okay, we don't have to be all that shy on this part. All right, so we're going to slip it in to the hammer, okay? And then we're going to pull that release back so we can move the hammer, okay? And then we're going to cock that hammer back all the way. Let it go ahead and lock. It's fine, okay? And then we can remove our paper clip, all right? And that's that. Now we're going to pull the trigger and let it go back forward. Okay, from here, we have to put this little dickens in there, okay? Now, it has to go in so that this side goes down in front of the hammer, and the other end of it hooks over that little pin that's on that trigger return spring piece. Okay, now from there, this hook on the side plate goes up into position on the top, okay, and then this goes back down into place. All right, now come on, get in there, you. Now you're going to press it down. It's not going to want to go down when you're pushing it like this. And the reason why is because that little piece in there that goes up, that bar that goes between the hammer and the frame, that bar is going to need to seat into its socket a little bit. So again, we're going to need to hook that release with our finger, okay, and then manipulate the hammer a little bit while we're pressing down, and you'll feel it when it goes in. It'll just drop in just the tiniest bit more, and from there you can push it down. Take the heel of your screwdriver, make sure that you use one that's plastic or wood, and just tap it a couple of times into place, okay, until it goes all the way down. And now, okay, it can't fly apart on you, so you won't lose track of any of your pieces. All right, now, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up because, as you can see, it's pretty nasty. All right. So we're going to just take one of these wet patches and we're going to wrap it around, and we're just going to crank it between our fingers like that, and that's going to clean it up very nicely. Okay, get all that garbage out of there. All right, so we don't get an inordinate amount of wear on that pin. Okay, because that's what the cylinder is going to rotate on. All right. So you get all of it cleaned up, okay, and my fingers are getting slippery, so I'm going to dry off a little bit with this rag, okay, and we're going to clean everything we can here. Now, you can take this apart, okay, by cranking this nut off the end, all right, and it doesn't want to come, so I'm not going to fight it. It will come apart if you feel like you really want to take it apart, all right? One of the things I run into with these videos is they sometimes get very, very long, okay? They're sometimes on for a long time, okay? In fact, there's so much time has gone by that one of the cameras has lost room on its memory because these videos are pretty big. Alright, so from here, I'm going to put a little bit of oil on this shaft, okay? And I'm going to stick it back through. Okay, so that's going to go back through there. We're going to put just a little bit of oil on here. Just like I said, that's what our cylinder rotates on, okay? And I'm going to put just a drop in here, okay? And now we're going to slip this back in where it belongs on the frame, okay? Once it goes in there all the way, okay, I'm going to close it back up, okay? And now the revolver is fully functional, okay? So from here, we're going to put the screws back in the side plate. You remember how we discussed those earlier, where one of them has that special end on it, and it's a slightly bigger screw than the others. So we're going to put that one in, and that's going to hold the crane in place with the cylinder so it can't get away. Now we're going to take the second one that has the little rounded, slightly rounded head, and we're going to put that in the middle hole right behind the trigger guard. Okay? And now we're not going to crank these down really hard yet. Okay? We're going to snug them against, okay, like that, until we get all three of these screws in the hole. The reason why is because if something is out of place and we crank down on it, we can actually bend this side plate. Okay, so we don't want that. So we go gently, okay, till we got it all put back together, till we're happy, and we can see that it's seated the way it's supposed to be. And now we can put the prerequisite little bit of torque on it to keep them in place, okay? Now, again, you don't have to go insane with this, but make sure they're tight, okay? So from here, we have a fully functional revolver, okay? And we're going to put the grips back on. So this is the easy part. Now I did want to show you something with these grips that is kind of important. Okay, now these grips are rubber, okay? When we tighten this screw into place, if you over tighten this screw, it's going to pull the top of this apart because it distorts the whole darn grip. So you don't want to go too hard on tightening down this grip screw. If you have wooden grips on a revolver and you crank down too hard on that center screw that goes through the thing, what'll happen is you can crack the grips. So just get it snug, all right? Now I'm going to go ahead and over tighten this and show you how it pulls this grip apart at the top, okay? So as I crank down on it, can you see the separation that's in here now? I mean, it's wide enough I can stick my screwdriver in it. So that's too tight. All right, so back it off a little bit. All right, just have it up against, okay? They're rubber grips. They don't have to be that tight, all right? So that is the Model 60/9 5-shot revolver, Part 2. Hey everybody, Bill 1911 here. If you found this video to be helpful and informative, don't forget to like us, and please subscribe, and by all means come to visit us at askbill1911.com. Also, I want to talk to you about something that's very important to us, and that's your safety. So please, don't try any of the things you see on our videos until you have thoroughly reviewed and understood our safety procedures. If you're under 18 years of age, do not try any of these topics without the express permission of your parent or guardian. Thank you.